Hello there, I'm Johnny Go and I'm here to talk to you about communication. Communication in Ignatian leadership. Specifically today, because of our context, I'll be talking to you about communication in times of crisis. Let's begin with Ignatius. Did you know that Ignatius, during his lifetime, wrote about 7,000 letters? And the reason is, for him, communication is so important. He really believed in this quotation: without communication, there is no relationship. St. Ignatius understood that, especially for the early years in the society when, as we know, many Jesuits were scattered not only all over Europe, but also all over the world. Communication is crucial in every organization, whether religious or not, because every organization is made of personal relationships. And personal relationships are built through communication, specifically in Ignatian leadership, through conversations. I think we know this picture well. This is the picture of St. Francis Xavier and St. Ignatius of Loyola during their years in Paris. This was a time when Ignatius was trying to lead Francis Xavier away from his worldly ambitions to a more noble life, something quite familiar with St. Ignatius. And here we see the defining quality of Ignatian leadership even in the very early years of the society. Ignatian leadership is leading by conversations. Here's a quotation from St. Ignatius that I think is very important and very much worthwhile for us to think about. In one of his letters, St. Ignatius wrote, "We may lead others to good by praying or agreeing with them on a certain good point, leaving aside whatever else may be wrong. After gaining his confidence, we shall meet with better success. In this sense, we enter his door with him, but we come out of our own." End of quote. I don't know about you, but I think that's an amazing metaphor that shows us Ignatius's insight into the value of conversations and his strategy in conversations. Basically, what he's telling us is that we have to meet the person where he or she is. We must begin any conversation by trying to learn about the other person, learning about the other person's context, the other person's perspective, but it should not end there. That is already a value. But the greater value is we lead the person to understand our own perspective as well. So we enter through the other person's door, but we come out, hopefully, of our own. But this is only really one half of St. Ignatius's insight into the value of conversations. Real conversations require us to be authentically open, to be genuinely interested in what the other person is saying. So the danger with conversations is that real conversations may lead you somewhere else. It may change your mind. At least real conversations should have the power to do so. So we really need to listen and to be open. Now, why are conversations important? Well, there's a saying that goes, the smartest person in the room is a room. In short, the very gathering of people in the organization with their accumulated experiences, with their different perspectives, with all their insights, that's a great resource. It'll be such a waste if we do not draw from that resource. And how do we draw from that resource? Through communication, through conversation. Conversations are meant to generate ideas, propose scenarios, and make forecasts. But as we can guess, these types of conversations are made possible only when people feel safe, only when people feel that other people in the room are interested to hear their ideas and to learn from them. So one of the most important roles that the Ignatian leader should play is that he or she should make sure that people in the organization feel safe in rehearsing their ideas, in speaking up, that people have the permission to make mistakes when they're trying out these ideas. Roy Bennett, a famous author, says the greatest problem with communication is that we don't listen to understand. Instead, we listen only to reply. I don't know about you, but this happens to me a lot of times, and I have to resist this temptation. When somebody else is talking, instead of listening with full attention, I end up preparing my response to the person either because I want to be able to speak articulately or I want to be able to impress the other person. So I think that's a temptation that we should resist. When it's time to listen, we really have to listen. I think if we want to promote Ignatian conversations, if we want to promote effective communication in our organizations, we have to make a choice. We have to discern when it's time for us to talk and when it's time for us to listen. And when it's time for us to listen, our job is to shut up and pay full attention to the other person. One of my favorite quotations in communication comes from George Bernard Shaw, the famous playwright. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has actually already taken place." His point here, obviously, is that many times communication hasn't taken place, but we take it for granted that it has taken place. And that's the biggest problem. Now, here's a book from David Perkins, which is called King Arthur's Round Table. And the subtitle is How Collaborative Conversations Create Smart Organizations. I think all of us here will say that we want our organizations to be smart. Now, how do we make our organization smart? Through communication, through conversation. And in this particular title, in this particular metaphor, David Perkins uses the image of the round table because the question he wants every leader to ask himself or herself is, how round is your table? How fluid is your environment? What he is asking in these two questions is the communication in our organizations two-way? Are we able to consult every single person in the room? And the sad fact is, usually, this thing called feedback, where people give their reactions, their response to ideas, feedback frequently flops. Usually, feedback doesn't happen. And so here's a paradox about feedback. Feedback in organization is both immensely productive, it is absolutely valuable, but it's also annoyingly vexed. Usually, feedback is stuck. We don't get feedback as much as we should or as soon as we should. And what's the reason for this? The reason is culture. The culture of the organization is not yet too conducive for feedback not only to be solicited, but also for feedback to be volunteered. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about one form of feedback that people don't really like to think about. And I'm referring to gossip. People usually look down on the grapevine. They dismiss rumors as not only harmful but also useless. But the truth is, gossip is perhaps 20% accurate, but usually it has an impact of 80%. Perceptions are real, no matter how false they are. Perceptions can do damage. So it's important for Ignatian leaders to be able to manage perceptions. And what do I mean by this? By this, I mean don't ignore gossip. Don't just react to rumors. So it's important for us to manage gossip because gossip will actually provide us with feedback. Gossip can be a valuable source of information. So here are some tips on how we can manage gossip or perceptions in general. We need to keep our ear close to the ground. We have to know what's going on. We can't say we're above all that. It's important for us to get feedback even if informally, even if only through the grapevine, because sometimes the culture of the organization does not encourage direct feedback giving. Second, we need to address them or correct them if they are wrong by providing accurate information. This can be done through a formal communication like a meeting, a discussion, a memo, or you can do this informally as well by talking to certain influential persons in the organization. Third, whenever helpful, name the elephant in the room. Of course, by elephant in the room, we're talking about taboo topics, topics that are too sensitive, that people don't want to talk about. But many times, these topics are precisely those that need to be talked about. So whenever helpful, that's an important clause. You shouldn't do it all the time. There are certain cases, certain situations when it may actually be harmful to name the elephant in the room. But whenever helpful, it is important to talk frankly and honestly about these taboo topics, because you are sending the signal to the people in your organization that it's absolutely acceptable to speak about everything as long as we do so with reason and respect. And my last tip, well, there are cases when some rumors are best ignored so that you can kill the story. Sometimes it's better to do that. Now let's focus on communication, especially in this time of pandemic. It's a time of crisis. It's an absolutely abnormal time. People are stressed out. People are worried. Times are very uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. What happens to communication at a time like this? I think it's important for us to resort to every possible device in times of crisis and pandemic. More than ever, communication is important. But there's a caveat here. We should resort to memos, we should use emails, we should send out texts, we should even use Facebook, make phone calls, and in this day and age, we use Zoom meetings. Every single means of communication I've mentioned here is efficient. But there are times when what we need is not exactly efficient communication. Sometimes we need to resist the temptation of efficient communication because it is inadequate. I remember when I was a school leader, there were times when I didn't want to talk to faculty or staff who were always complaining. Some people are known to be complainers. Some people are known to be unhappy no matter what the school does. I'm also quite reluctant to talk to parents, especially the kind that I call parents from hell, because for them, their children are always right and the teacher and the school are always wrong. I always find myself tempted to resort to memos, emails, texts, and other communication technologies that are more painless than face-to-face conversation. Now, that's well and good, except that most of the time, those are the people who need a face-to-face conversation, or during the pandemic, a Zoom meeting. No? The reason is that many times, those people who are difficult, the people you need to have a difficult conversation with, are precisely the people who feel they need to be listened to. And sometimes memos, emails, texts, or phone calls even are not enough. So it's important for us to resist this temptation. Yes, it's easier, it's more painless, it's more efficient to resort to technology, but there are times when it's better to be face to face. There was one time when a parent was giving our teacher a really hard time because she was defending her son and she was berating our teacher. And our teacher has given up, our principal has given up. So what did they do? They sent the parent to the president. I was very tempted, knowing what I knew about this parent, to simply write a memo or a letter or maybe just send a text to her about a decision, that the decision is final regarding her child, regardless of how she feels. But by God's grace, after discerning about it, I decided, okay, this is part of my job as the head of school, so I'm going to take the bitter pill and I'm going to speak to her, but not before I pray. I wanted to make sure I would not lose my temper during the conversation, because losing your temper is not going to help. So I prayed really hard for the Holy Spirit to guide me. You know, surprisingly, the conversation went much better than I expected. No? Yes, I suffered through the conversation because the parent went through her usual spiel of how wrong the school is, how terrible the teacher is, and how absolutely perfect her child is. However, right before the conversation, I made the decision that I was going to listen to her, that I wasn't going to argue, so I was not allowing myself to be pressured to make any decision right there and then, so I was more relaxed, but I was able to acknowledge her concerns. I was able to listen to her and agree with her fears, her anxieties, and even reassure her without making the decision that she was pressuring me to make. So by the time I made the decision and relayed it to her, no, this time through a phone call, she was more open. Why? Because the communication method I used was not exactly the most efficient. I wasted about 2 hours. I spent about 2 hours talking to her, but it was time well spent because she felt listened to. And in that conversation, she felt validated, even if we continued not to agree about the case. So communication is really important. And as Ignatian leaders, we need to reflect whether our communication, the way we converse with people, meet the criteria that are needed for communication to be effective. Here's a very simple, easy to recall checklist. First of all, obviously, our communication should be clear. So if we are not comfortable as speakers, for example, I consider myself more of a writer than a speaker, and it's important for me to organize my thoughts before I speak up. Unlike many extroverts who are able to speak on their feet and think on their feet, no. So if you know you're that kind of leader like myself, then I will make sure to prepare my thoughts first and get organized so that when I finally say what I need to say, I will be clear. No, I will not end up saying something else. Of course, the situation is easier when you're writing out a memo or writing a message. Okay. Now, communication has to be timely. No, it's very tempting to postpone difficult conversations, as I said earlier. But sometimes it is better to nip any problem in the bud, as any expert will tell you. So communication has to be timely. It has to be adequate. It has to be enough. No? Especially in a time of pandemic, no, we cannot assume that communication has already taken place. It's okay, it's absolutely okay to repeat yourself, to reiterate yourself, to highlight your big ideas, no, to strengthen your message so that people will get it. I don't know about you, but I've experienced many times in my life, in my professional practice, that you've already said something in a way that you thought was very clear, and you've already followed up with a memo, and yet people did not quite understand. So it's never possible, I think, to over communicate, especially in a time of crisis. Communication also has to be prudent. This means that there are certain things that you cannot say. No? There are times when you can even name the elephant in the room, but there are also times when it is better not to say anything. No? Because saying something may actually be counterproductive. So it's important for the leader to be able to discern when these occasions are. And finally, communication, for it to be really effective, must be consistent. It must be consistent with previous messages. It must be consistent with your practice, with your action. And if you need to deviate from previous messages, if you need to change a particular communication, go out and say so. It's absolutely okay to admit that you are changing your mind, because I think people respect that. Now, in an Ignatian organization, cura personalis is an important value. Cura personalis refers to nurturing personal relationships with the individual. The emphasis here is on the personal and the individual, not everyone in general, but every single individual. It means giving personal care for each person in the organization. Again, the emphasis is personal and each person in the organization. Now, this is not always possible. It is always not easy to do this, especially if your organization is large. But cura personalis can be exercised not directly. You can actually delegate this to other people. Just make sure that the climate and the culture in the organization is one in which people feel safe and people feel cared for. And every time that people have something to say, it is important to give them permission to do so. After all, cura personalis is one of the defining ingredients of an Ignatian organization. And to be able to promote cura personalis, we must pay attention to the way we communicate, to the way we converse. So here are a couple of questions that Ignatian leaders will do well to ask themselves. How do we converse? Are we able to listen to others with attention and empathy? This means that when the other person is talking, we're not just preparing how we're going to respond, but we're giving the other person full attention, listening so that we will learn from what the person is saying. And are we able to listen with empathy? In short, we're not judging the other person, but we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person. But also, when we speak, is our language littered with blame and criticism? Because this seems to be the default language thanks to the prevailing culture in social media. So, Ignatian leaders should be discerning, reflecting about the choice of words that they make when they're communicating and in conversation with others, but also, and perhaps especially, the nonverbal cues and the tone that they communicate to the other person when there's a conversation. So it's very important for Ignatian leaders to be very mindful about these nonverbal cues. Um, I'd just like to end by sharing with you my own framework of Ignatian leadership. In Ignatian leadership, it's not just the relationship of the leader and the community, but it's also ultimately the relationship of both community and leader with a mission. Now, as you can see, the leader must have what I call contemplation, no? A contemplation of the mission. The leader must have an understanding and appreciation of the mission of the organization or the community so that everything they do, every single task, every single effort is consecrated ad maiorem Dei gloriam. So it's very important for the Ignatian leader to be very much connected to the mission. But that's only the first connection that an Ignatian leader should be able to make, this connection to the mission. Just as importantly, the leader must have a connection to the community members. And this is done through Quora personalis, which can be actualized through conversations. That's why I said earlier, for me, Ignatian leadership is leading by conversations. It's important for the leader to have this twofold connection, a connection to the mission through contemplation and a connection to the community members through conversations, because the ultimate goal of Ignatian leadership is for the community members to themselves connect to the mission. And this connection should be characterized by a commitment of magis. The community members should be able to commit themselves to the mission with or without the leader. It must be a direct personal commitment. And this commitment is characterized by a desire to do excellent work, to do more, to always be better, ad maiorem Dei gloriam. I think this is a good diagram to sort of capture what Ignatian leadership is all about. There are many ways of capturing Ignatian leadership because it's really a very rich concept. No? There's a lot we can say about Ignatian leadership. But I hope my talk in communication has illustrated for you why the relationship between the leader and the community must be characterized by conversations, must be marked by conversations, real conversations, because that's how Quora personalis happens. So I hope this talk on communication has illustrated to you how the relationship between the leader, the Ignatian leader, and the community in an Ignatian organization must be characterized by Quora personalis, and Quora personalis can be attained through personal conversations. Let me leave you with one reflection question. Recall one or two ideas about communication from this talk that you consider most valuable. Just choose one or two, if any. And then ask yourself, and this is the more important question, what initial baby steps can you take to apply them in your exercise of Ignatian leadership in your own context? So think of your organization, think of your work, or think of your future organization and your future apostolate, your future work, no? And ask yourself, given one or two ideas that I've discussed or brought up in this talk, how can you apply them? How can you use them, even if these are only initial or baby steps? So thank you very much for listening to my talk. I hope I was able to offer you some new insights, some fresh ideas about Ignatian leadership, but also some practical tips about effective communication in an Ignatian organization. Thank you, and God bless you, and all the best to you.